Here's the uncomfortable truth that will change how you see relationships forever: the most physically captivating women are often the most emotionally unstable. And before you judge them, understand this. It's not a character flaw. It's neurological conditioning that started before they could even recognize what was happening to them. Picture this. A girl grows up turning heads everywhere she goes. Strangers smile at her differently. Teachers are more patient with her mistakes. People forgive her faster than they forgive others. Store clerks offer help without being asked. Doors open. Opportunities appear. Special treatment becomes routine. This isn't occasional. It's constant. Day after day. Year after year. Her developing brain absorbs a dangerous pattern that most people never experience. Her nervous system doesn't categorize this attention as special. It catalogs it as normal. It becomes her psychological baseline. The foundation upon which her entire sense of reality is built. And that's where the problem begins. While everyone else develops their identity through accomplishment, through failure, through struggle and internal growth, hers forms through something completely different. External validation. She learns unconsciously that her worth isn't rooted in her character. Not in her intelligence. Not in her resilience or her values. It's measured by how others respond to her appearance. This is what psychologists call an externalized identity. A sense of self that depends entirely on outside confirmation rather than internal conviction. And once this wiring sets in during those formative years, it becomes the operating system for everything that follows. Think about what this does to a developing mind. Most people learn early that the world doesn't revolve around them. They face rejection. They experience being ignored. They discover that effort matters more than appearance. These painful lessons build emotional resilience. They create internal anchors. They teach you who you are when nobody cares. But she never gets those lessons. Instead, she learns the opposite. She learns that her presence alone has value. That people will accommodate her. That doors open not because of what she does, but because of how she looks. Her brain wires itself around this reality. The tragedy is that nobody sits her down and explains what's happening. Nobody warns her that she's developing a dependency on something completely outside her control. Nobody tells her that basing your identity on other people's reactions is like building a house on sand. And why would they? Everyone around her benefits from keeping her exactly as she is. People enjoy being near beauty. They want her attention. They want to be chosen by her. So the pattern continues. The conditioning deepens. And by the time she's an adult, her entire psychological framework is built on the most unstable foundation imaginable. Other people's opinions. Other people's desire. Other people's validation. All temporary. All unreliable. All beyond her control. But her brain doesn't know that yet. It just knows what feels normal. And normal is constant attention. Let's talk neuroscience for a moment, because this is where most people completely miss what's actually happening inside her brain. Every time someone desires her, something chemical occurs. Every lingering look. Every compliment. Every message notification. Every double take from a stranger. Her brain releases dopamine. The same chemical that makes drugs addictive. The same mechanism that creates behavioral patterns and gambling habits. The same system that teaches your brain what equals survival and what matters for your existence. This isn't some abstract psychology theory. This is measurable brain chemistry. Over hundreds, then thousands of these interactions, her brain doesn't just enjoy the attention. It starts requiring it. It becomes chemically dependent on that external stimulation. Her baseline dopamine regulation adjusts to accommodate constant validation. Her neurological set point shifts upward. What would feel amazing to someone else becomes her new normal. And once that happens, everything changes. Think about what this means in practical terms. Normal interaction becomes understimulation. Regular conversation feels flat and unrewarding. Ordinary relationships register as emotional deprivation. Not because they actually are, but because her nervous system was calibrated in an environment of excess. It's like someone who grew up in a mansion. A normal house doesn't feel cozy to them. It feels claustrophobic. Not because there's anything wrong with the house, but because their baseline for normal is completely different. When the attention inevitably decreases, and it always does, her brain doesn't interpret this as life being normal. It interprets it as danger. As loss. As threat. As something fundamentally wrong with her reality. Her nervous system triggers legitimate stress responses. Anxiety floods in. Insecurity takes over. Fear of abandonment activates. And she can't explain why because she doesn't understand the mechanism creating these feelings. This is why you see patterns that seem completely irrational from the outside. Overthinking minor changes in your texting pattern. Needing constant reassurance despite being objectively stunning. Feeling inexplicably insecure when you don't respond immediately. Creating tests and drama seemingly out of nowhere. She's not playing games. She's not being manipulative. Her neurochemistry is literally experiencing withdrawal symptoms. Her brain is screaming that something essential is missing. That her survival is threatened. That she needs to do something to restore the dopamine flow. And here's what makes it exponentially worse. Social media arrived and turned this psychological pattern into an absolute catastrophe. Now the attention doesn't just come from her immediate environment. It's unlimited. It's instantaneous. It's quantifiable. It's endless and available 24/7. One photo generates 500 likes. 1,000 likes. Dozens of direct messages. Hundreds of validation hits flooding her dopamine receptors in minutes. Comments from strangers. Reactions from people she's never met. Attention on a scale that no natural human interaction could ever provide. Her brain experiences stimulation levels that evolution never prepared humans to handle. The nervous system that took 20 years to wire around constant real-world attention now gets reprogrammed in months by algorithmic amplification. Here's what happens next. Her dopamine system recalibrates again. But this time to a level of stimulation that's completely artificial and utterly unsustainable in actual life. A genuine connection with one person, no matter how deep, can't compete with the neurological rush of mass validation. A quiet evening with someone who truly knows her feels empty compared to the dopamine explosion of posting a photo and watching the engagement flood in. She posts a picture before bed. Wakes up to 3,000 likes. 70 comments. 50 new followers. Her morning starts with a chemical high that rivals what drug users chase. And her brain logs this as normal. The algorithm learns what generates engagement. It shows her content to more people. The numbers grow. The validation multiplies. The dependency deepens. And real human connection starts competing with a slot machine that pays out every single time. Think about the psychological impact. A boyfriend gives her a sincere compliment. That's one dopamine hit. She posts a selfie. That's 800 dopamine hits in the first hour. Her brain does the math. It knows which behavior generates more reward. Normal becomes intolerable. Stability registers as boredom. Quiet moments feel like deprivation. Authentic intimacy feels inadequate. Not because it lacks value, but because her brain chemistry was trained in an environment of constant intense superficial stimulation. She can be lying next to someone who genuinely loves her, and still feel empty. Because her phone is 3 feet away offering unlimited validation. The comparison is neurologically impossible to ignore. This creates a devastating split. Part of her wants real connection. Wants depth. Wants someone who sees beyond the surface. But her nervous system is screaming for the stimulation it's conditioned to expect. The two desires are in constant conflict. And the metrics never stop. Followers. Likes. Views. Comments. Shares. Story reactions. Direct messages. Every single one is quantified feedback on her worth. Her value becomes a number that updates in real time. When those numbers drop, even slightly, panic sets in. A post that gets fewer likes than usual feels like rejection. A story with low views triggers insecurity. The algorithm changes and suddenly her reach decreases. Her brain interprets this as her value decreasing. So she posts more. Tries harder. Shows more. Does whatever generates engagement. Because the alternative is feeling that withdrawal. That emptiness. That terrifying sense that without the attention, she doesn't exist. This is the hidden tragedy playing out across millions of lives. The very thing that seems like her greatest advantage, her beauty, has become the architect of her psychological instability. It built an identity on the most temporary, unreliable foundation imaginable. Other people's reactions to pixels on a screen. Here's where everything you thought you knew about attraction needs to be dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up. Most men operate under a fatal assumption. They confuse physical beauty with psychological strength. They see a stunning woman and unconsciously attribute other positive qualities to her. Confidence. Stability. Emotional maturity. Self-assuredness. Inner peace. But beauty reflects genetics. Nothing more. It says absolutely nothing about resilience, self-awareness, or emotional stability. Zero correlation exists between facial symmetry and mental fortitude. Some of the most breathtaking people you'll ever encounter are simultaneously the most psychologically fragile. Not because they're bad people. Not because they chose this path. But because their entire identity was constructed on reactions instead of foundations. And reactions are temporary. Beauty fades with time. Attention shifts to the next person. Trends change. The algorithm moves on. The crowd finds someone new to obsess over. What remains when all that disappears? That's the question most people never ask until it's too late. The real measure of any person, regardless of appearance, is who they are when nobody's watching. Who they are when nobody's choosing them. Who they are without validation, without an audience, without external confirmation of their worth. Because that's the version you'll be living with long term. Not the version fueled by Instagram likes and constant desire. Not the highlight reel. Not the carefully curated image. The version that exists in ordinary moments. In conflict. In silence. In struggle. In failure. This is the moment your entire framework shifts permanently. You stop being hypnotized by appearance. You stop assuming beauty equals substance. You stop making relationship decisions based on biological impulse and start making them based on psychological compatibility. Your eyes still see beauty. Your biology still responds. But your decision-making comes from a different place. From assessment. From observation. From asking the right questions. How does she handle disappointment? What does she do when she's alone? Who is she when her phone dies? How does she treat people who can't do anything for her? What happens when things don't go her way? These questions reveal character. They expose the foundation underneath the facade. They show you whether you're dealing with someone who's built internally or someone who's entirely dependent on external scaffolding. Attraction is biological. It's automatic. It's beyond your control. Your DNA responds to certain features because evolution programmed it that way. That's fine. That's natural. That's human. But compatibility is psychological. It requires discernment. It demands honest evaluation beyond what your eyes and hormones are telling you. It needs you to see clearly despite the fog of desire. The man who truly understands this stops chasing intensity and starts recognizing reality. He sees beyond the surface not because he doesn't appreciate beauty, but because he understands that lasting connection requires something beauty alone can never provide. A stable, internally grounded sense of self. And that's rarer than any physical perfection you'll ever encounter. If this changed how you see relationships, subscribe now. More truth coming soon.